OnlySins. When I went to see the place, as is, no frills, good price, the guy said. What about that painting? I asked, referring to the only thing in the otherwise empty shithole. He shrugged. You take or no? Saddled with debts after an education and a string of failed startups, I wasn't in a position to bargain. Yeah, I bought a bed frame and desk, and I left the painting up. It looked vaguely medieval. A few weeks later, as winter tightened its grip on the city, I noticed that the apartment, for all its decrepitude, kept me warm at night. Then I noticed the source of that warmth. The painting, or rather, behind the painting, which I took down, revealing an aperture in which a man's head was on fire, his creased face contorted into an unfathomable intensity of pain. His screams, though silent, felt like damnation. After it had burned, another head took its place, and another. What the godless crap, my friend Schuster said, wiping vomit from his mouth after I showed him the heads. Take a freaking picture. Oh, I did, and I put it online in as many places as I could. Do you know this man? Somebody did. She called me sobbing. He was my father, she said in tear-stained staccato. He died in 2013. He did. She hung up. But here was the pattern. Everyone identified a dead person. A dead, bad person. It's hell, Schuster said. It's a goddamn window into hell. We both realized. Monetize. Schuster was already dreaming. OnlySins. Pay money to watch these people burn. We set it up and started looking for investors. They didn't come easy. No one does religion anymore. Where's the sex? You guys are nuts. Then we met Bube Bezels, a bona fide angel investor with a taste for the eccentric. Gentlemen, please call me Bobby, he said between puffs on his ivory pipe. I believe in OnlySins. With the seed money in place, we blasted off to the freaking moon. Users growing exponentially, subscriptions just increasing, OnlySins trending, viral, insidious, lucrative. Watch these people burn as we bathe in cocaine and BTC, swallowing our companies and living the life. The demons of Wall Street, the economists dubbed us, and I proudly mounted that issue on the wall of my 19th floor office. Sir, Mr. Bezels to see you, my assistant said. I let him in and he sat down, taking a puff of his ivory pipe. We had a magnificent view. I wish to thank you. No, thank you, Bobby. Without your faith in us, raising his hand, I'm afraid you don't understand, he said, smiling empathetically. Faith? Yes, but not mine and you. Theirs. He swept his arm to encompass the city below. In hell, you see, and for a splintered second, I did. The world becoming flat and artificial, like a stage on which reality was a fluttering curtain, just parting. To exist, hell requires belief. Thank you for manufacturing it, he said, horns already sprouting.
The couple that slays together. Rita and George were the ultimate power couple. Their seemingly limitless wealth financed their luxurious lifestyle, replete with travel to exotic destinations, high-profile charity work, partying with stars, and the occasional murder. George had a truly unique zest for pleasure, while Rita came from East Coast old money, a heritage born out of her classic style and stately demeanor. A perfect couple, his charm and easy demeanor balanced out by her cool elegance. And then, their mutual taste for murder. They had started so long ago that George couldn't quite remember how it had begun. Although Rita, with her clockwork brain, remembered every detail of her first accidental slaying of the cleaner named Mary Ann shortly after their honeymoon in Belize. Since then, there had been 152 more victims, spread throughout the 30 years of their brilliant marriage. Every time had been as thrilling as the first time, with the plotting, the disposal, and the actual deed riveting and binding them together in an unbreakable steel bond. Rita stared at herself in the silver-framed mirror, somewhat critically. Her beauty was as well maintained as ever, but just as well, she had a Botox appointment coming up. She pinched her neck and thought about Vivian, whom she had decided would be their next victim. Vivi was one of their favourite masseuses, who had been serving them for several years. In fact, she stayed in-house whenever they visited this particular location, famed both for its natural beauty and its electric nightlife. Her touch was both sure and light, and her massages induced a swooning relaxation. However, Rita knew that swooning sensation was trivial compared to the intense joy murdering her would bring them. Also, she had noticed George's eyes linger on Vivi's young body a little too long. She would get her own private extra thrill from throttling the skillful masseuse. She was so caught up in planning the deed for later and figuring out the logistics of the disposal that she barely noticed the door of her bedroom swing silently open. Vivi moved swiftly, and within seconds, she'd looped Rita's favourite Hermes silk scarf with its distinctly black and gold design around her neck and pulled tight. Rita struggled, and she was certainly no weakling, as fit and lean as expensive workouts could make her. But Vivi's youthful strength and ardor conquered, and soon Rita was slumped over, lifeless, on her exquisite dressing table. Viva called out to George. George walked in. Vivi understood he wanted to avoid the actual killing. After all, Rita had been a good, loyal wife to him. But she had made it clear disposal was up to him. Now, looking up at his confused, overexcited face, she realized that she had made a mistake. "George?" she said. He was too overcome with emotion and couldn't answer coherently. Sighing, Vivi pulled out her cell phone and began calling.
The Quiet Game. Peter, I'm home. I want you to pack your bag. Nathan invited you to another sleepover. Doesn't that sound like fun? He shook his head. It didn't. The last time he went over to that kid's house, he couldn't wait to go back home. It wasn't just that the house always smelled like compost or cat food, or that his parents were penny pinchers and didn't leave the lights on. Those were the reasons he told his mother why he didn't want to go again. The real reason was Nathan. His mother called him special and said that his brain was missing a piece. But this wasn't what bothered Peter. He already knew Nathan was a little different than most kids his age. That was okay, Sometimes he felt different too. He almost forgot about what happened last time that was so terrible he quietly cried himself to bed for 1 week. He jogged through the dark cobbled hallway of his memory until he remembered it again, or what it looked like. Nathan called it the quiet game. He remembered being locked in a dark room with them and leaving shivering. Something broke. Was it glass? And his nose started to bleed. That's all he could recollect. What else happened that night? He dwelled on what happened on his way to Nathan's house. He thought maybe, his fingers crossed, this time would be different, and that everything else that happened that night was just a bad dream. It was evening, and they'd just finished eating their pizza. Nathan's mother was going to bed upstairs, and the boys were going to sleep downstairs. They were sitting on the living room floor. For the first time all night, Nathan said something. The house says it wants to play a game. He agreed to this. He didn't want to be rude. What is it? Quiet game. Okay, how do you play? The rules were very simple. You had to be perfectly quiet. Hold your breath, or else the house... Or the house would be mad, Nathan said. He counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. When he was done, he quickly covered his eyes with his hands and plugged his ears and started to rock back and forth as silently as he could. Peter waited for what felt like half an hour. 30 minutes of nothing. He hadn't made any noise yet, but he was tired and wanted to go to bed. Nathan, I don't want to play anymore. He looked at him with horror. No, he kept repeating, no, 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 no. First it was the lights. The sudden cacophony of light bulbs exploding overhead. Then the room went black. Peter turned on his flashlight. Standing over him was a very tall man. He smelled dead and looked even worse. His face was covered in mud. Game over. You lose, but thanks for playing with my son. This is his favorite part. Nathan started laughing, and you won't remember a thing.
I wished my life was more like a video game. One night, I saw a shooting star, and I wished that my life was more like a video game. I'd had a few beers in me at the time, and I thought it would be funny. I don't know how it happened, but my wish was granted. I awoke the next morning with a health bar floating over me. I looked at it in confusion for a few moments and then tried to get out of bed. I managed to stub my toe and I watched my health bar go down a little bit. I replenished my health by eating my breakfast, and then I got an achievement called Most Important Meal of the Day, and I leveled up. I sat there with the biggest smile on my face as I considered all of the possibilities. I spent the rest of the day wandering around doing random tasks and constantly getting achievements and leveling up. I tried to explain it to people about my power, but people just looked at me like I had two heads. I got home after a busy day, after reaching level 25, and I threw together a big meal to treat myself for all that I had accomplished today. I brought the fork to my mouth, and I tried to eat, but for some reason, I wasn't able to consume food. I desperately tried to shove food into my mouth, but there seemed to be some kind of barrier blocking it. I smashed my hand down on the table in frustration, and I cut my hand on the steak knife. I saw my health bar drop slightly due to the injury. A piece of food that had been caught on my upper lip fell onto my tongue, and I gladly ate it. I tried to eat some more food, but the barrier had appeared once again. The cut on my hand had instantly healed itself the second I had eaten. I began to realize that the only way to eat was to injure myself. I grabbed the knife and I slid it down my arms and watched my health slowly drop. I managed to get a few more mouthfuls of food before my health was full again. I have tried my best to not level up, but even something as simple as getting out of bed or going to the bathroom, it gives me points. I stayed in bed for a whole day, and I got an achievement called Lazy Bones. I sit here, at my kitchen table, starving, and cursing my luck. It has gotten to the point where I have to smash a hammer on my hands repeatedly in order to even eat one small bit of food. People won't believe me when I tell them what's going on, and they think that I have an eating disorder. Can someone think of anything I can do? As I am in a state of constant hunger, and I can barely muster the strength to stand. If you can help me, please, let me know.
Smile. I was born smiling. No, really. I slid out of my mother's womb, covered in a film of blood. While the other babies around me erupted into wails a few minutes later, I was laughing and smiling. As I grew up, I wondered why I was the only one who smiled all the time. Everybody else was so volatile. They screamed, they wailed, they threw tantrums. Even the adults had their limits, and sometimes they even got angrier when they had too much to drink. I was hit all the time. I was even bullied in school for smiling too much. Freak, they said. But I never complained. I kept on smiling and laughing. Can other people smile too? I asked myself that question all the time. Then I decided it was my calling to make them smile. After all, it was best to be happy, wasn't it? I started with Jack. He was never a happy boy. His family beat him, I think. At school, he would sit down at the lunch table and stare at his food, his hoodie over his head. I did everything to make Jack smile. I told jokes, I pulled pranks, but Jack would stare back at me with nothing in his eyes. He was a hopeless case, pun intended. So I decided that desperate times called for desperate measures. I invited him to my house one day. He agreed readily. I think he was willing to be away from his family for once. Then I knocked him out with some sleeping pills that I mixed with his cola. Once he was asleep and secured to my bed, I got to work. It was all a matter of knife work. I was very pleased with my results. I widened his mouth with my knife, twisted both ends upward into a thin smile. Jack looked a bit like a vampire, with blood splattering his face and dripping down on his bedsheets. But it was just a side effect of my genius. When Jack woke up and looked into my bedroom mirror, he screamed. I took it as a thank you. He rushed out the door and never came back, but I didn't mind. He was smiling now. That was all that mattered. After him, I took my knife to school and began my life's work. People tried to run away. I didn't get it. Smiling is good. Being happy is good. I was trying to make their lives better. I was trying to make them happy. I was doing God's work, you know. If you smile, the whole world will light up for you. Now everybody understands. Everybody is smiling, except for you. You're always frowning all the time. Why? There's so much in the world to laugh and smile about. But don't worry. I'm here. Don't struggle. You'll only make things worse. Just relax. And I promise you will be smiling in no time.
My wife and I agreed we never wanted children. When I was growing up, I was forced to raise my younger siblings, as my parents were too lazy to do it themselves. It got to the stage where they actually ended up calling me Daddy, as I was the only parent they ever knew. It put me off ever having children of my own, as I didn't want to experience this again. I don't blame my siblings, as they were just children at the time. My wife, she had a similar experience growing up. We both had decided early on that we would never have children. Both of our parents acted like we were assholes for not giving them grandchildren, but we just walk away. Unfortunately, there was an accident a few weeks ago, and my brother and his wife were killed. Their 6-month-old son survived, but was now an orphan. My parents demanded that we take him in, but we reminded them that we were never having children. They showed up with him in a child seat, and they forced us to bring him inside. They told us that if we didn't let him stay here, then we would be disowned by the family. A few weeks later, my whole family decided to surprise us with a party to celebrate us being parents. They arrived at our house and immediately took over our whole house. My parents kept asking to meet their grandchild, and I walked over to grab him. My mother's face went pale, and she began to vomit as she saw his rotting corpse still sitting in his child seat. I reminded them that they had told us to let him stay here, but they never said anything about taking care of him. They never mentioned grandchildren to us ever again, and I'd used my taxidermy skills to make my nephew a permanent fixture in our home.
My pet dog can talk. Owen, wake up, it's urgent. Huh? Who is calling me so early in the morning? The voice seemed to come from below my bed. Then I looked down, and my eyes bulged out of my head. My dog Coco was yelling my name, his eyes wide with fear. Am I dreaming? Am I hallucinating? Is my dog really talking to me? But it was real, all real. Everything came crashing on me at once. Holy cow, you can talk? Yes, but I don't have time to explain. The world is ending, you're in danger, follow me. What can I do? Coco headed out the door. I had no choice but to follow him. It was too quiet outside. We've known this for a long time, Coco said, breaking the silence. He paused and looked at me with his big brown eyes. See for yourself. The sky was a deep purple, and a curtain of fog hung down low near the ground. The sun was a red halo in the sky. People were thrashing on the ground. Their faces were white as a ghost. Some turned and coughed up blood. I followed Coco through the streets, noticing the air just seemed to hold its breath. Dead birds littered the streets, their corpses shimmering in the light. Coco was right. The end of the world was here. But I know a king, Coco said. The path seemed to slope gradually downwards. Heat blasted my face. Shadows danced on the walls. Terror engulfed my heart. Whoever this King Coco was talking about, he must be majestic. We've been talking a long time, especially about you. You've been a good master. I especially like those little chicken biscuits. I want to repay you. Then he sang a few hymns about the king, the savior of this world. Coco could sing especially well. It put my mind at ease. Finally, we reached the bottom of the pit. Coco nudged me forward. My heart dropped to the pit of my stomach. I took a shaky bow. He was 20 feet tall, with googly black eyes that were as cold as steel. His skin was flayed open, revealing a mess of beating hearts and entrails that whirled and twisted into each other. Arms and legs moved in hypnotizing harmonies, almost like it had a life of its own. Then Coco spoke reverently, and his words chilled me to my bone. Here's your dinner, master. A fresh one. Bon appetit.
Monsters used to have it so easy. There was a time when we could simply lurk in the dark, untethered, unhindered, feeding on the primal fear you humans had. But now, you have your walls, your locks, your electric lights. Some cling to the old ways, creeping through the dark. But they're so easily dismissed now. To survive, we had to adapt. We had to find new wilds to explore, new blind spots in your vision. How does one do so in a world of light? The answer is simple. We cling to the mundane, the small details of your existence that you find too tiresome to see. We find new things there to feed on. The primal fear that made us strong is in rare supply. The old ones have withered in the new age. But as you little monkeys create shiny new things to fill your lives, we find new cracks to fester in, new rules to exploit, new sources of discarded refuse to gorge ourselves on. New opportunities breed new monsters. I grew from your cooking box, the microwave as you call it. It didn't happen right away. It was only in the last few decades that I truly realized my potential. You squeaky little monkeys became afraid of the noisy little cooking box and started going to great lengths to stop it. The youthful among you are my greatest asset, so riddled with pinprick fears that you'll sprint to catch it. So many details went into this subtle fear, poking and prodding at your behaviors to my benefit. Modern etiquette demands that no remaining time be left. It's quite the inconvenience in your tiny minds. How will I see my clock? You whine. Why should I have to press the button for you? You snivelling ants, you disgust me. No matter though, the time is often cleared before it gets stale. If not, well, food is food. And I'm smart enough not to let one morsel go to waste. You see, my darling little apes, I feed on your wasted time. Nothing is ever truly lost in this universe. Like the garbage you stain your oceans with. But someday, somewhere, someone will come along and find some good use for your discarded treasures. That's where I come in. Those abandoned seconds cleared from your microwave, they don't just disappear into the void. They exist in a plane you're too dull, to even try to comprehend. That is where I wait. I gather every precious second you throw away, and I keep them. My life is patched together from discarded time. If the time ever runs out, I will cease to exist. So, why would I tell you this? Because, frankly, my furry little chimps, it makes no difference. You can spread the word. You can run your timers out. You can do anything you like. I already have enough time to outlast your entire weak species. What you should really be asking is, what do I intend to do with it?